Hey, what's up guys? Today is Friday, June 26th. It's 7:55 p.m. and the temperature is 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 79 in Fahrenheit. The plan for this walk is to make a left here at Bloor Street West and walk over towards the Koreatown, Annex, and Yorkville neighborhoods. There's a look at one of the freshly opened patios here in the city. This here is the Dovercourt Park neighborhood. And that was Ossington Station that I just left. This is the third day of the Stage 2 reopening for the city. And already it seems a bit busier than it normally would be throughout this pandemic, which is obviously a very positive sign. Oh, there's a free keyboard if you want. You don't see that every day. So while the restaurants and bars are still closed for dine-in service, they are allowed to open their patios. It's just a look down Concord Avenue. And although it's almost 8 p.m., there's still a good amount of daylight out. The sun usually doesn't go down till just after 9 p.m. in the summer. If this were the winter, it gets dark somewhere around 5 p.m., so it's quite a big difference. This here is Ossington Avenue. To the left would be the Ossington Avenue entrance to the subway station. There's a small bus terminal there as well. And if you turn south down Ossington Avenue, which is the direction we're facing, at College Street, you'll find Little Italy. And if you keep going, you'll eventually make your way to the West Queen West neighborhood. In addition to being called the Dovercourt Park neighborhood, this area is also known as Bloorcourt Village. Although, to be honest, I don't really hear it called either much. Most people just tend to say it's the area around Ossington. That's one of the government-controlled liquor stores. Lately, there's always been large lineups as they restrict the capacity. And even though the lineups are big, it's generally still a pleasant shopping experience because there's not too many people in the store, so it's quite easy to get in and out with your goods without coming in close contact with people. There's a bar, the baseline, They don't have a patio, but they are serving beer for takeout, which is something that the city has allowed. There's an unutilized patio. Well, I'm not sure if that's a city, it's probably a provincial rule, but a lot of bars are able to get away with selling beer as takeout as long as it accompanies some kind of snack. So a lot of them are selling like a small bag of chips or something, just as a loophole to get around that. This bar is making most of their small patio space, if you could even call it that. It's certainly nice to see people getting out on a Friday night and just having a drink and relaxing a bit. There's Tall Boys. I've spent many a night in there. Most of the stores in this area are smaller and independently owned type shops. And you may have noticed there is a dedicated bike lane. The city installed this as part of a pilot project back in 2016. It runs between roughly just beyond Ossington over to Avenue Road. Initially, there was a lot of opposition for them. Most of the businesses in the area were against them, as well as most motorists that were pulled. But of course they would be. But I believe it's turned out to be the second most trafficked bike route in the city. So it's been quite a success so far. This is Crawford Street. And this here is Christie Pits Park. There's quite a few people enjoying the weather, having a nice time. This park gets its name from the sand pits that used to be here. Well off into the distance there is a baseball stadium, which is home to the semi-professional Toronto Maple Leafs of the Inter-County Baseball League. And I believe it's the only team in that league where they don't charge admission to see their games. Fun fact, sometime back in the 90s, my older brother played in that league. He played for Hamilton and a team they had in Stratford. So I used to get paraded around and go to a lot of those games. Eventually he went off to play in the NCAA on a full scholarship. There's also a nice park or a nice hill in the background for tobogganing. There's a lot of sports facilities here. a few more smaller baseball fields. In a way, it feels like a more laid-back, down-to-earth version of Trinity Bellwoods Park, which is to the south of here. Although I say that as I realize it was the scene of the infamous 1933 Christie Pits riots. I think that was between some pro-Nazi supporters and a Jewish softball team that didn't end so well for a lot of the people involved. It was really more of a giant melee or a brawl. But still, it's hard to hear stories about this place without that coming up. And to the left is Christie Street, and to the right is Grace Street. I used to live just up that way for a year back in the late 2000s, I think 2007. I had a fairly large, fully finished basement apartment, and it included all utilities except the internet, and I was only paying $700 a month, so good luck trying to find that these days. That's Christie Station, online too. So that means we've walked the distance of roughly, or exactly, one subway stop so far. Just to the north here is Fiesta Farms, which is a really nice little grocery store. And this marks the beginning of Koreatown. Most of this area was settled by Koreans in the 70s. There's the Poop Cafe. Just trying to leave some space between myself and these people.
Not helpful.
I wouldn't really recommend a visit to the Poop Cafe. It's not all that good, and it's fairly expensive for what it is. And that's a sad scene over there. That's the former location of Clinton's, which is a bar that served the neighborhood for something in the neighborhood of 80 years or so. There's a club area in the back. That's Sundabu Dolsot Bop, otherwise known as Bukchangdong Sun Tofu. It's one of the more popular places to get pork bone soup in the city. And right next to it is Tacos El Astor, which used to be located on this side of the street. And in there is a rock climbing gym, formerly an adult theater. I'm sure they gave it a thorough scrub before they moved in. And that's PAT, the local Korean grocery store. If you are from Korea and you're missing that taste of home, definitely give this place a look. We have a few different locations in the city, and Galleria, I believe, is the other big Korean grocery store. It looks like the lighting might be a bit better on the other side of the street, so I'm going to cross over and give it a look over there. The poor boy doesn't have their patio open. This light doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. I'll just keep going. It's not just Korean restaurants in this area. There's a bit of everything. And if you remember a TV show called Kenny vs. Penny, they would often go here and visit Dr. Goldfield for some ridiculous advice. If you've seen the show, you'd know what I mean by that. And that guy should not be riding his bike on the sidewalk. There's Hair 1010. I used to get my hair cut in there. Speaking of which, I finally got a hair appointment as they just recently reopened. So Sunday morning, I will hopefully no longer look ridiculous. A lot of people will say this looks kind of like what Korea would have looked like back in the 70s and 80s. Because if you go to Korea these days, most major retail strips are lit up with neon and LED signs. Chungcheon rice hot dog. That used to be a place called Unji Bunchik, which translates to thumbs up local eatery. A place I used to go to a lot, but it's no longer there. This is Palmerston Avenue, one of the nicest residential streets in the city.
Outside?
And this place in here serves my favorite Korean food, cheese dakgalbi. I've had the good fortune of eating that dish several times in Korea, and it just kind of blows my mind that it's not more popular over here. It's really delicious. I try to describe it, but I'm quite terrible at all at describing food, so you'll just have to take my word for it or look it up. This construction hoarding here is for the Mervish Village redevelopment, as on this corner used to be the iconic Honest Ed's store. And just down this street was the Victory Cafe, a place that is sorely missed. They've since reopened up down the street as a pizza restaurant. If you've seen older photos of Toronto, you've probably seen Honest Ed's. It's popped up in a number of movies as well. I think I saw it in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It was opened from sometime in the 40s to 2016, I want to say. It was really a giant, junky dollar store. I don't really know how else to describe it. but it's missed. And at least it's not being replaced by condos. These are dedicated rental buildings, although I'm sure they won't come cheap. That's something we've gotten away from in the city lately. And this is Bathurst Street. So to the left is Bathurst Station. And that closed down coffee shop is the Green Beanery. I don't think the owners were local favorites around here. Bathurst is closed north of Bloor. He was known for being a climate change denier, I believe. There's the Fry. Get some excellent Korean style fried chicken. And Mr. Tonkatsu. That right there is the Hot Dogs Cinema. Or the Hot Dogs Ted Rogers Cinema. I think Rogers gave them something in the neighborhood of $4 million to open it up and reopen it and plaster their name on it. It was built in its current form in 1941. It replaced a theater that used to stand there. I've been there a few times. I saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show there once. This is Popper's Pub. They have a rooftop patio. They're owned by the same people who own the Madison. And I forgot to mention, but as we crossed over Bathurst Street, we entered a neighborhood known as the Annex. It's a very popular neighborhood with the university crowd. A lot of sushi restaurants in this area. And this interesting building coming up on the right is Lee's Palace. It's been home to a number of pretty famous musical acts. Nirvana's played there, Oasis, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Smashing Pumpkins. And up top is a place called the Dance Cave. They play a lot of alternative and dance rock style music. I'm a bit too old for these places anymore, but I've been a few times back in the day, and this art is a uniquely Toronto style art. It's done by a local artist who calls himself Runt, but his real name is Alex Curry. You can see his art on various buildings throughout the city. It's all done in that similar style. That's Sushi on Bloor, which is probably the most famous of the sushi restaurants on the street. It used to be located a bit further east of here. Over on that corner, benefiting from their large patio space, is the New Victory Cafe. Which is quite different from the old Victory Cafe, which was basically a pub and an older Victorian-style house. They've sort of reinvented themselves as a pizza restaurant in this location. And I think it's owned by the same people who own the Crafty Coyote right here. There's a lot of low-rise, tree-lined residential streets in this area. I have to be careful. I was standing in the bike lane there. I had become one of the very people that I hate. But at least I was looking to make sure the coast was clear. Riding your bike down these bike lanes is always a bit like going through an obstacle course. You're constantly on high guard looking for pedestrians stepping out in front of you. I actually find it to be a lot less stressful just simply riding on the street with the cars, but maybe I'm just weird. There's L furniture. I guess they're window side seats. Count as patio space. And this is Future Bakery on Brunswick Avenue. It's a well-known bar with a large patio. I'm sure there's a number of people on it. And that right there is the former home of the Brunswick, or the Brunswick House, otherwise known as the Brunny, which was a bar that took various forms throughout the years. That dates back to 1876, and like every nice older building in the city, it's been defaced and turned into a Rexall. Nothing sucks the life right out of a neighborhood spot like a Rexall or Shoppers Drug Mart moving in. They've sort of taken up prime real estate all over the city, a bit like the plague. I say that not that I'm opposed to it as an establishment. I just feel it robs the neighborhood of a certain amount of character. And that famoso Neapolitan pizzeria used to be a bar called James Joyce. I remember spending a New Year's Eve in there. I think they lost their liquor license as they were serving minors at some point. That might be just a rumor. It's certainly a very nice night to be taking a walk, that's for sure. I wasn't even planning on doing a narrated walk tonight. But I won't get the chance to get out and record one tomorrow, as for the first time in a very long time I'll be visiting my family who have moved up to Niagara Falls. I haven't been up there since this whole COVID ordeal. So I'll be driving out tomorrow morning, which means I won't get the chance to film a video in the city tomorrow, but maybe I'll bring my camera and record something up there. Probably won't, but maybe. This is Walmer Road on the left and Robert Street on the right. You can access the western entrance to Spadina subway station, which serves line 1 and 2 of the subway lines, although the platforms are quite far apart. This here straight ahead is Spadina Avenue on the right and Spadina Road on the left. And it looks like Greg's Ice Cream is no longer around. I heard someone tell me that they had gone out of business. They used to be located several blocks east of here, across from the Royal Ontario Museum. But there were some developments in that area, and they were forced to move, and they moved down to this building probably around a decade ago. So that's Spadina Station straight ahead. If you keep following north here, you'll eventually find your way to Casa Loma. And to the south that way will be Chinatown, and then eventually Lake Ontario. The University of Toronto has a pretty strong presence in this part of the Annex. That's one of its buildings right there. And this one on the left is student housing for undergraduate students. At least it was. My information might be a little out of touch. This is Madison Avenue, and I'm not sure if the camera will be able to pick this up, but where you see those lights and a patio out there, that would be the Madison Pub, which is a very popular drinking spot for 20-somethings, especially the university crowd. It basically feels like a few old frat houses sort of daisy-chained together. There's different rooms you can drink at. There's different spots outdoors. You have dartboards. Pretty much describing a typical pub, but they also have the piano man, or at least they did, who was a guy who did his best impersonation of Ben Folds 5. This building over here, when I moved to Koreatown, I remember looking in there and I found a unit, and it was quite reasonably priced, and the location is fantastic. But some searches online revealed that the whole building at the time seemed to have bedbug problems. Which is always something you have to be careful. Well, it's not a problem you hear about too often these days. There's various bedbug registries you can check out if you are thinking of moving into a new place. It's always worth doing your homework. That funky building on the right here is the Bata Shoe Museum. Bata Shoe is a Canadian shoe company. They used to have stores in pretty much every mall. I'm not too sure what happened to them, but if you're interested in the history of shoes, then I guess that would be the place for you. Then again, if you were interested in the history of shoes, you probably already knew about it and could tell me more about it than I could tell you, so there's that. So coming up here is St. George Street. To the right will take you down through part of the University of Toronto campus and into Harbour Village. To the left is the entrance to the St. George subway station. And about a 6-7 minute walk up that way is the Chinese consulate. Toronto is not the capital of Ontario, so rather than embassies, we tend to have consulates for most countries. The embassies, of course, are located in Ottawa. There's a sad sight, a white bicycle. You'll often see these close to the sites where cyclists were killed in accidents involving cars. It's just sort of the way that their loved ones and local members of the community commemorate them and honor them. And that in part has inspired all of this bicycle infrastructure we've seen in the city. Not too familiar with this building, but I'm sure it's part of the University of Toronto. This is the Monk School of Global Affairs. And where this dome is home to Varsity Stadium. It's where the University of Toronto football team, the Blues, play. They also host all kinds of track and field there. This is the rebuilt stadium. The old one used to be much bigger. It had grandstands on both sides. And it was actually the home of the Toronto Argonauts, the Canadian professional football team, a long, long time ago. But they decided to tear it down and rebuild it much smaller for some reason. When they built BMO Field down at Exhibition Stadium, I guess this location didn't have much attraction to large soccer events or rugby matches or things like that, so they didn't see the need to build a bigger stadium. Although the Toronto Argos were rumored to be considering this a site of their future home back when they were looking to relocate. But they've ended up joining the Toronto FC at BMO Field. The other entrance to St. George subway station is right up there. And right next to Varsity Stadium is Varsity Arena. Which is kind of in the background somewhere. Once upon a time I saw a concert there featuring Beck. And the opening acts for that were, there's Varsity Arena, were the Atari Teenage Riot and The Roots. That was long before either of those bands were that well known. Beck, of course, was very well known. It's the Royal Conservatory. And coming up is the Royal Ontario Museum. There's a look down Philosopher's Walk. Runs through the University of Toronto campus. I filmed that way a few times on this channel. This museum was built in 1912. You can see part of the original building there. And these jagged things sticking out of it are the Michael Lee Chin crystal. They're built in late 2000s, I think 2007. They're a bit controversial at the time, as not everyone agreed with such a grand old building being adorned by these jagged crystals sticking out of it. And I don't believe this is the original material it was intended to be built out of. I think this is a classic case of the Toronto cheap out where they substituted something else in to save money. They also made it a lot smaller than it was supposed to be. This addition was supposed to run throughout the entire building instead of just sort of the perimeter on this edge. It creates a lot of awkward exhibit spaces. So there's a lot of people feel that a lot of the square footage in here has gone to waste, but I personally think it looks quite stunning. Somebody up in that condo is having a pretty good time. The museum will be reopening on July 9th. And if it ever fully reopens, every third Tuesday of the month is free in the evening. So that's definitely worth checking out. To the right here is Queen's Park. It'll take you down to the Provincial Legislative Building. And just to the south of the museum is the planetarium, which has been shut down, but it was always my favorite part of this area. And to our left is Avenue Road, and to the right is Queen's Park. This eventually becomes University Avenue, which runs through the financial district. Here's a look at the museum. That old church is Church of the Redeemer. It's been here since the late 1800s. It's a fairly iconic building in this city. And we have just entered the neighborhood of Yorkville. And this particular stretch, which runs between Queen's Park down to Yonge Street, has been dubbed the Mink Mile, as it's home to a lot of high-end retailers, such as Louis Vuitton right there. Next to that is Tiffany, and then Burberry. In behind those buildings is the Yorkville Village area. There's still a lot of high-end shops in there, but on a smaller, more boutique scale. People often request in the comments that I do walks through Yorkville. Sadly, another white bicycle. But I do pass through that neighborhood quite a bit. This is some of the most expensive retail real estate in the country. And even in the world. I remember reading somewhere citing that it was the 22nd most expensive place for a store to pay rent per square foot. There's Gucci, And Winners/HomeSense, which is kind of a lower end retailer. It's a bit out of place here, but hey, if they can pay the bills, why not? I'm not even sure all these stores are profitable. It's well known a lot of these big retailers will take up prominent retail spots in cities. It's more of a branding exercise than anything, just to say, look who we are, look where we are. They can afford it. Dolce & Gabbana. Over there used to be a pottery barn. They've left town. You could take that walkway over there into the Yorkville Village area, which back in the 60s was kind of a bohemian hippie village. It wasn't until that era had passed that it started going more upscale and eventually arrived at what it is today. So Holt Renfrew for men. Holt Renfrew is a large Canadian luxury department store, which is actually located a few blocks to the east of here ahead of us, and Harry Rosen. I don't own a single thing from either of those stores, and I probably never will. There's a look into Yorkville. I'm sure I'll be back there soon with the camera, so if you want to... Oh, Lamborghini. I think that's a Countach. It's always a good show of supercars in that area. As I was saying, I'm sure I'll be back at some point in the near future and wandering around there with the camera or on my bike. This is Bay Street. So if you go right here, this will take us south down towards the lake and through the heart of the financial district. And to the left, it goes up for maybe half a kilometer or so, and then it ends. That big purple boarded up or under construction store there is Holt Renfrew. There's a look at the new Four Seasons. It's a hotel and condo, I believe. There's Italy, which opened in the winter of last year. I haven't had a chance to go yet, but I've heard good things. Although I'm not much of a food connoisseur, as my dinner tonight was Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Always a healthy meal for an adult grown male. I did put a banana in it though, so that's got to count for something. Holt Renfrew under construction. That really tall tower is 1 Bloor East. And on the other side of the street, there's a tower that they started construction on, 1 Bloor West. But there's rumors that the developer has seen their funds run dry because people haven't seen the cranes move in a while. But that could also just be due to this stupid coronavirus. It's called the Mink Mile, but there are some retailers here that I could actually shop at. Although this H&M usually closes earlier. I wonder if they're just staying open late because they lost so much precious retail time earlier. What if these are new hours? I believe it used to always close at 7 or 7:30. And it's 8:45. We're coming up on Yonge Street, so I think I'll pop into the subway station here. This is the street I've recorded the most on this channel, being Yonge Street. It seems to be what people want to see. Whenever I post a video of this street, it always does well in terms of views and average watch time. This, of course, runs south all the way down to the lake and is the main east-west divide of the city. So we were on Bloor Street West, but now we're on Bloor Street East. I think I'll pop into the subway on this side, as I always tend to enter when I record these videos from the other side. We'll get a look at the Chick-fil-A lineup, as it was closed the last time I walked through here. Still haven't been. More of a Popeyes guy anyways. And here's the entrance to the subway, just behind the Nordstrom rack. This is all fairly new, opening within the last few years. And I can't even remember what used to be on this corner. I know on the One Bloor West site was Stollery's, an old clothing store that the city failed to designate as a heritage building, so a developer quickly snapped it up and knocked it down before anyone had time to blink. There's a lot of controversy about that. And for a Friday night, there's sure not a lot of people in here. If you're wondering, I am not wearing a mask. I have one in my pocket, and as soon as I stop recording, I will throw it on, and in the meantime, I will make sure to keep my distance. Well, I'd keep it anyways, even if I was wearing it. I also have a small bottle of hand sanitizer in my pocket. So when I put the camera away, I'll give my hands a good cleaning, throw the mask on. And it sounds like there's a train here. I was right, it was just on the other side. So even though the city starts to open back up and we're in stage 2, this isn't very busy for this subway station. This is the busiest subway station in the country. And normally at this time on a Friday night, it would be very busy. There's another platform below us for line 2, but this is the busier of the two platforms. Alright, it says next train in 2 minutes. Wow, there's already another train pulling in ahead of that one. So they're certainly running frequent service.
Attention customers, please be advised that the lane between Finch West and Wilson on line 1 is now clear and regular service has resumed. Wilson to Finch West is now clear. Regular service on line 1.
Alright, on that note, I'm going to call it a walk. So if you like this video and want to see more, click like, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.